Welcome to the Church Solutions Podcast, brought to you by JSL Solutions. The Church Solutions Podcast is designed to help equip you and your church in the use of technology and other tools and services. And now, here are your hosts, Steve Lacey and Phil Thompson.
Hi, and welcome to another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast.
Hi, my name is Steve Lacey.
And I'm Phil Thompson. So we're so grateful that you've decided to spend a little bit of time with us today on this podcast. We do this usually every week. We are a tech company called JSL Solutions, but we work pretty much exclusively with churches, and we love to help churches with tech stuff. But Steve and I, as we say so often, have been working with churches in pastors and ministries. Steve's been on boards and on leadership teams. I've actually been in pastoral ministry until they kicked me out. And, well, they didn't kick me out. But anyhow, long story short, we love churches and we love helping churches. And so many times we'll talk about a variety of different topics, from tech-related things to maybe not tech-related to more helping volunteers and working with people. So, Steve, what are we going to talk about today?
So today we have a special guest.
We do. And her name would be?
Is Cathy Hutchison.
Hi, Cathy. How are you today?
Hi, great to be here.
So, Cathy is with a company called Idibri, or Idibri, I guess is the best way to say that. And Idibri, and you've been with them now since 1996. You have been involved really working in areas of consultations and working with people that are involved in technology venues. You're also a contributor to church production and worship facilities. These are magazines and newsletters. Also another one I think is Church Designer Magazine. You get all over the place, Cathy. You speak at conferences and dealing with marketing, personal development, and we're just glad to have you here. Thanks for spending a little bit of time with us.
Thank you guys for inviting me.
Well, you're very welcome. Very quickly, before we get into our topic today, tell us just real briefly about Idibri. What is Idibri?
Sure. So we are technology designers, acoustic consultants, and theater designers. And a good percentage of our work is with churches. We've done a lot of churches that you've probably heard of. And it's interesting because we work in a lot of different markets. So, we have NFL stadiums and big performing arts centers and massive entertainment venues. But one of the things, I guess, that's most interesting about it is we tend to tell all of our other clients that by far the highest creativity is coming out of the churches and the church production teams.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's normally we speak with people, we say, oh, that church is behind on, the technology or that sort of thing. They're typically playing catch up. So in this arena, though, they're leading the game, huh?
Absolutely. Churches are doing so much with meager resources, and they are maxing them out because they're creating every 7 days, right?
Right.
Like it's a Sunday to Sunday deadline. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Well, that's good. And you're working with some churches that are really growing, and that's good to hear. So let's talk a little bit about really our topic today. And this is a topic that you have written on before, and it's how do we get better at what we do? And that's, I know for what I do for a living, and Steve and I, and then even the ministries we work with, our own personal churches, I mean, we always are striving, to improve upon what we do. And so let's talk a little bit about that. What do you think the biggest challenge is for people like church professionals who are in growing churches today?
So the problem is that growth happens incrementally. So you might be an amazing audio guy, but as you get promoted, you need way more than just your technical skills. And the problem is that because it's just happening slowly, we don't realize how much things have changed until we're working way too many hours, totally battling to keep up. And so maybe you can relate to that.
Yes.
And, the demands of ministry in particular are always going to outpace our ability to deliver. So we get to this place in ministry where there's so many things happening at once that we feel like we're just, spinning plates or juggling balls and just trying to keep everything in the air. And there's this terrible weight that if we stop, the whole thing is going to come crashing down, right?
Yeah, I can relate.
So So one of the things I think that as we find ourselves in this position, I mean, we're never going to have unlimited amounts of resources, of time or energy. So what happens is we usually have a mission problem. So if we can't do everything, then what is the one thing that we absolutely have to do to meet the mission? And I have to say, the person who taught this to me is Craig Jansen, who's the managing director of Idibri. Okay. So, as much as 20 years ago when we were, I was way new to the industry and we were first working with churches, what he would start every single kickoff meeting for every single church project, outlining this concept of mission, activity, facility. So you know how it is. When we're getting together and talking about a new project, typically everybody wants to talk about the gear. Oh, I saw this at this church, and this is what we need.
This is what the new kids, this is what the cool churches are doing, so we need to do it too. This is what the cool
kids are doing, yes. So dialing that way back and identifying what your mission is, and then determining what activities you're doing to meet the mission, then you're in a position to talk about what kind of facility you need, what kind of gear you need, what kind of equipment you need. And it's the same thing for us personally.
Yeah. So what kind of different missions do you see with the churches? I mean,
so everybody says we're going to reach people, right? Like that's the main church mission. But
the
that
Great Commission.
is, the Great Commission. Right. Don't we all have the same one? But the reality is that each church, and quite frankly, each production team or any type of ministry team has its own mission, because it has to be, your mission inside your church has to be somewhat specific. Right. So if you're going to reach people, if that's the big macro mission, which people?
Right.
Where are they? What are they like? With limitless resources, we can reach everybody. But the reality is you've got your resources, your time, your energy. What's your mission that's part of this bigger mission of the church? And what does that super specifically look like?
Yeah, I can remember years ago I was speaking with this fellow who was, he was involved in kind of, he called him really more apostolic in the sense that he was helping oversee a number of churches. And I told him, I said, well, what is your mission? And he goes, well, we want to reach people. I'm like, well, I know that, but specifically, who are you trying to target? And he really couldn't answer me. And the result was, they were going all over the map. They were everywhere.
Right.
And they were accomplishing very little.
Yeah. I remember at, some of our church leadership meetings putting together what we called the Tucson Tom family. Right. And so you go through and identify, who are we trying to reach? And that person got a name, and they got an occupation, they had a place to live, they were, they're interested in this, and we kind of geared our ministry around reaching that family. So
yeah, drill it down.
Did you find that it gave you more focus?
Oh yeah, it did. And then what comes from, I'm just starting to catch on, and what you mentioned is clicking with me now. It flowed into, then as we made decisions around the church, as far as the music lineup, or what kind of music we're going to have, or what's the place going to look like, or that was all geared towards that. And we said, well, these guys like going to Starbucks in a nice, comfortable, clean place. Our facility will be, something that would appeal to that group. So
basically, the mission of your church was to reach you, right, Steve? Because that defines you. Except you don't.
It may have been
money.
30 years ago, but
your wife spends money on Starbucks, but not you.
No.
So we're talking with Cathy Hutchison here, and so Cathy, we're talking about this, and it sounds pretty simple to me, but what happens? What keeps us from really progressing in this area?
So the biggest thing is when we're busy running around juggling plates. Whenever we're really stressed, we completely lose our ability to prioritize. And we all do this, right? Like, have you ever been working on something significant, but then you get sucked away something trivial? My favorite illustration of this is there's this great episode of Mad About You where Jamie spends the whole episode, every thought of hers is about buying a bath mat. And Paul, her TV show husband, says, why is our whole life now about buying a bath mat? But we do that, right? Because a bath mat is we can put our hands around that, right? This small, tiny thing that we can own, that we can tackle, and our brains would much rather engage that than in doing the thing that we're scared of or the thing that we might fail at.
I think that's interesting. I think there's a fear of failure sometimes that a lot of us run into.
Well, and even without that fear of failure, the other thing that works against us is that even if you've got a really clear mission, it feels better to slip into your office every day and be in responsive mode rather than creative mode. Mm-hmm. And email has made this really, really easy, right? You can go in first thing in the day and there is no shortage of people asking for your time.
Right.
So it makes us passive.
That's true. Yeah, I've listened to some others speak, and they said your email box is everyone else's priorities imposed on you. So yeah,
absolutely. But as long as we stay in that responsive mode, then we're never going to meet the mission. We're never going to put anything new out there or produce something that changes the game. And I can relate. Like this has been a major problem for me, and I've actually been test driving some strategies and have stumbled on some that have worked.
Oh. So tell us more about these strategies.
Yes, please. We need
stuff that works.
So for me, this looks like getting up. I get up at 5 a.m. every day to work on my personal creative projects. So I get 2 hours every morning to work on the stuff that I care about the most. And then when I get into the office, I don't get into email until 9:30 so that I can spend that first 90 minutes creating something. And this might be creating an article for one of the church magazines that I write for, or something else that I consider real work where I'm actually producing something. And I noticed, so I was nervous, totally nervous. Can you imagine walking to the office and not opening up email for an hour and a half? I figured something horrible would happen, but nobody even noticed. Like nobody notices that I'm MIA for the first part of the day because they're all busy responding to their own email inboxes.
Right.
And probably one of my favorite things that came out of this experiment is Idibri launched pastorplan.com, which is a resource for churches and pastors that are thinking about building. And so it's everything from, just advice, like how do you keep your project from sort of devolving into value engineering? There's some really specific things churches can do at the beginning of the project to protect themselves in that area, to tools where you can compare the size of your space, when you're going to need how much space based on your attendance, and can plug that in. And then there's some budgeting tools to see how you're going to pay for your project.
Good.
And all that's free, by the way. So yeah.
Wow, that's good stuff. Awesome. All right, so we're moving on here. So we're coming up with blocking out some time here for yourself.
Yes.
And this would apply, and we've got people that we have pastors listening to this. We have lots of volunteers that listen to this podcast.
Yeah, I can relate to this because I mentioned I worked for a large aerospace company before we started recording, and the culture there was very much you had no more than a 30-minute window to reply to the boss's email, and I was very guilty of setting up work time where I'd say, I'm going to work instead of read email for, so, and I've kind of carried that into, what we're doing now. I can relate to what you're saying, where you set up some schedules where you only do certain things during certain times. So you make sure you get the important stuff done.
Yeah, I mean, if you want to read more on that, it's called batch tasking, and it's where you work on the same types of stuff in the same areas. The other strategy, quite frankly, is that if you're going to focus on mission, you have to get really good at saying no, and that requires us becoming better at having hard conversations. So one of the things about serving in a church is that sometimes the lines get blurred between what's spiritually essential and what's just cultural. Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you guys can relate, but if you're a woman with children in church, there is a cultural expectation that you'll serve in children's ministry, even if you suck at it.
Yep.
And so, I'm a pretty animated person. And when I had kids at home, I was repeatedly asked to work in children's church. And they finally made me an offer that I really couldn't refuse because they came up and said, 1 hour, one Sunday a month. And so I said yes. But I didn't count on doing something that far outside of my gifting, the impact it would have, because it was exponentially draining. So on Sundays when I had to teach, my stomach hurt. My days leading up to it were filled with dread. And then afterwards, I was wiped out for days after I taught. And I'm embarrassed to say that we actually left the church so that I wouldn't have to have the hard conversation to admit that I couldn't do something so seemingly simple and something that was really expected. And which is stupid. I mean, how stupid is it that I couldn't just man up? That's kind of funny that I use that phrase. That I didn't just woman up in that and say how I was really feeling. But we do worry about what people think about us. And we aren't always honest about how we feel about our commitments. And my guess is that everybody listening to this podcast has a demanding job. And we can so easily commit to things that we aren't wired for because we're really worried about what people would think if we said no.
Right. And it's tough to say no. I know that my wife's gotten really good at it, though. So she's in a similar boat with you. She actually used to be our children's director at our church, but now she just serves in the children's ministry occasionally. But she's gotten very good at recognizing her limits and what she's gifted at, and she has no problem saying no now. So
yeah, well, that's good. So Cathy, and I appreciate you sharing this, and I appreciate you sharing even your personal feelings on this. That takes some courage to do, and we're grateful for that. So let's kind of move on, and we got a few more minutes left here. So we're talking about how do you get better at what you do or at what we do. So what are some things here, practically speaking? How do we get better at what we do? I was looking at an outline we put together here, and you've got at least 3 things here.
I do.
Help us. I'd love to hear them.
Well, so we've already covered having a defined, actually written down mission for what it is you're trying to accomplish, and then getting good at saying no and clearing away everything that's not serving that mission. Okay. But then you've got to begin acquiring skills like crazy to equip yourself, because the difference between the people who really thrive and those who get stuck is almost always about skill acquisition. And I'm not talking about technical skill. The reality is if you're volunteering in church, or if you're serving on staff in a church, you have the skills it took to get there, and you're in an environment that's going to require you to improve. Like, you're just going to get better through doing. But the further we go, the more the skill sets we need have zero to do about the technical stuff. I mean, think about it. Like, all of the pastors that started out small, I mean, they don't teach you in seminary how to run a Saddleback or a Willow Creek or a Hillsong, right? You're a guy who has an amazing ability to lead people and preach, and suddenly you're running a multi-million-dollar corporation. Like, that's different. You need a team around you for that. Right. And the reality is that's the trajectory, maybe not to that scale, but that's the trajectory that most of our team needs. I mean, I work with a group of theater designers and engineers, and as we've grown, the most important ability that we have is the ability to help people make decisions. Okay. Because all the best engineering in the world isn't effective if you have a client who's caught in the loop of circular decision making. Mm-hmm. So we've had to bring training in and actually get better and become the kind of people who can help clients get out of that loop. In fact, our mission at Idibri is great solutions delivered rapidly without U-turns. And that without U-turns is helping people make solid decisions at the front.
So, Phil, you were just saying at lunch that many pastors are not equipped to basically run a business, and you made the same comment that Cathy did. Yeah, the church is a business in a sense, and there's some skills that are needed to run that.
We're going to get some flack for saying that, but I just believe I've been doing this since the late 70s, and there's certain things you've got to know, and if you don't know it, you certainly have to delegate it, or at least have, as Cathy just mentioned, a team of people around you that can help
with that,
in those certain areas. And we deal with a lot of churches. That's who we are, with streaming video and mobile apps and church content stuff. We deal with churches all the time.
And this also reminds me, we interviewed I can't remember his name, but he was the sound guy for Joel Osteen, right?
Yes, Joel Osteen, sound engineer, and I can't remember his name either. He's probably going to be really mad
he's
when
listening.
he hears this.
He's
I'm
like,
sure he's listening at every.
But he made a very similar point that because we were going in through what makes a really good sound guy, and it's not the technical skills. They said, that's the beginner stuff when getting involved in the ministry, but really to grow was the softer skills.
Yeah, absolutely. So, Cathy, we want shortcuts. Any shortcuts?
I do not know any shortcuts. However, I don't know how many of your audience have read Malcolm Gladwell's book Outliers, but basically he talks about this 10,000 hour theory. Basically that it takes 10,000 hours of practice to become world class at something. The good news is that Josh Kaufman has this great TED Talk out that says that the research shows it only takes 20 hours to become competent in something new. Mm-hmm. So just this whole idea of that consistent daily action, it's not glamorous. It's just consistent. Right. I mean, we all want to be the hero leaping from the exploding building to save the child, right? But it's to get to that point, you've got to get up each morning and do the push-ups and the jumping jacks. And if you happen to have a salmon ladder and you're practicing for Ninja Warrior or whatever, we've got to have the strength to do it. But we so want to get to the end result.
Right. It's the everyday, the little things that are going on that prepare you for that.
Yeah,
absolutely.
It's kind of one of the things, my sage advice to my children. I said, it's not one decision you've made, but it's what you make every day, decision you make every day that's going to influence, how the direction of your life.
Well, it's a good reminder for all of us.
It's
even
little
adults,
decisions. Yeah.
It's the little decisions that really add up. I do a little part-time gig with a small little church, and we kind of try to get organized and kind of evaluate each other, so to speak, that are on staff and volunteers. And one of the biggest compliments I recently got from my senior pastor was he said, "Phil, you are consistent. You're there day in and out." Now, my creativity is a dud, but at least I'm there.
Yes.
I show up, and he didn't say that. He didn't say I was a dud. But when he said that, though, I thought, I really do try my best to be good at what I do and consistent at what I do in helping this local church. Right. And I think that's very important.
It's important. Yeah, I think it is.
All right. So no shortcuts, but we need to just be consistent at what we're doing, right, Cathy? What else can you give us here? We've got a couple more minutes left here. So
sure. So I think the other thing I'd add is that easy is earned. Okay. So when we first started driving, you really had to think about it, right? Because all the skills were new. So 10 and 2 and check your rearview mirror and don't forget your seatbelt and how to parallel park. But now we just get in the car and drive.
Right.
And there's something about that consistently adding those new experiences that they start really hard and we have to think about them. But over time, we stop thinking about how to drive. We're just drivers. Mm-hmm. And so it's the same with any skill we want to pick up is we start it, it's uncomfortable, but knowing that it's only 20 hours to competency can give us a little more courage to jump out there and actually try things to get those skills.
Absolutely. Good deal. All right, so Cathy, we're talking with Cathy Hutchison here from Idibri, and tell us how can people take there's some resources people could maybe grab from you guys. I mean, you mentioned something free earlier, but even if it's not free, I think we need to let people know what's available.
So there's much more about Idibri at idibri.com. And specifically for churches, we have free resources at pastorplan.com that I would love for everybody to check out.
Right. So the Idibri is IDIBRI. Is that correct?
Yes.
.com. It is. Thanks.
All right.
Good deal. Awesome. And so I'd encourage folks to check out those websites again. And it's never too late to get kind of on track. It's you might be sitting here listening to this podcast going, yeah, but I've been doing this for years and I'm in this rut. No, stop thinking that way. There's some ways you can break out of your rut and you can get better at what you do. And part of that, I think, is what we just said earlier, Cathy, saying no to certain things, mm-hmm. especially if you're in a smaller church or a mid-sized church. It can be really, well, I guess it's for any size.
Yeah, I would think so, yeah.
Knows an important word. All right, good deal. All right, so Cathy, people can get a hold of you by going to those websites, right?
Yes.
Okay, so Idibri.com, and Steve said it, I'll spell it out again, IDIBRI.com. And then, I'm sorry,
you also have a monthly column in churchproduction.com. Is that correct?
I do. I do the Church in the Digital World column at churchproduction.com. It's in the blog section.
Oh, great. Okay.
That's good stuff. I've run across that. And you've been in other places as well. So that's awesome. All right, good. Well, look, I'm sorry we're out of time, but we need to have you on again sometime in the near future.
All right. Thanks so much, guys.
All right. Well, thank you, Cathy. And if you want to get a hold of us, give us some feedback, just send us an email, support@StreamingChurch.tv. We would love to hear from you, get some feedback on what you think. Maybe you think this is a great idea. Maybe you think, I'm not sure about that. Well, we'd love to hear from you. So StreamingChurch.tv is one of our main websites. We got several out there, but support@StreamingChurch.tv would work well. So the guy across the table from me is Steve Lacey. We've been talking to Cathy Hutchison. I'm Phil Thompson, and we will catch you again on another edition of the Church Solutions Podcast. Take care.